Hello, I'm Laura Stevens, and this is workshop 6 of Design with Nature, where we're looking at biological diagrams and abstracted design principles. How you go from the function that you find in nature and apply this to your function need in your design. So you'll be looking at how does the function work, you'll be describing strategy or mechanism of the organism, and you'll be visualizing and labeling what's happening here. Here you can see where we are in our process from in the biomimicry thinking challenge to design process. We've gone through the scoping, we've defined the context, we have identified the function and integrated life's principles as design brief requirements. After discovering natural models in the bio brainstorm, we are going to abstract these biological strategies. That's where we are in the process. So today's program is an introduction to biological mechanisms and their translation to engineering. So how do you define the strategy and the mechanism in engineering terms? For example, look at the slippery surface of the pitcher plant, where insects will climb on the opening and slide into the plant. How does that happen? Well, Biomimicry 3.8 has an example of how this happens. At the top, you'll see the biological diagram. Look in to see the whole plant and then zoom in at a specific place to get a closer look. And at the top, in the middle, you will see the ant walking on the surface. And then zooming in, what is happening there? Why does the ant slide into the plant? So you zoom in again, and you'll see the little wax particles that stick onto the foot of the ant and make a slippery hydrophobic surface. So the ant slips in and is digested by the plant. So in the bottom half, you'll see how the biology is visualized. Then in the all far right circle, you see the design principle illustrated in what's happening at the point of when it slips in. And then you'll see the strategy, how it's summarized really, really briefly in the words sacrificial layers. So the pitcher plant will use sacrificial layers to survive, to gain food. The pitcher cup is also called the monkey cup, and that will be the organism. I also prefer to have the scientific name in here as well. And then you can see the summary will be the monkey cup plant traps insect prey with a suite of mechanisms that ensure a carnivorous meal. The vessel-shaped plant collects water and secretes nectar into the club base. So this will be the collection of the strategies and the mechanisms explained even further below, that the insects will descend into the cup to collect the nectar, and then they'll try to climb out using their claws and hairy foot pads. To override this mechanism, the pitcher plant has the inside layers. They're coated with small waxy crystals. And when the wax crystals detach onto the foot, stick to the insect tries to escape, the wax builds up, and covering the feet and rendering them useless. So the ant slips in and is digested within the pitcher plant. So the function will be specified also. How does nature create slippery surfaces? And this is one way that nature does that, by eliminating friction. We can also take a look at a diagram that we looked at earlier in class, where we look at the function, the strategy, and the mechanism. You can also make a kind of mind map where you're looking at the organism. You'll go into different details, do cross sections, see what angles, what operating conditions are influencing them, like the sunshine, so where the sun or the heat is coming from, and what patterns you can see when the plant expands or contracts, what's happening within the different sections of the cactus. And then you can see that as the function would be regulate temperature. That's how it can survive in the desert. It has a strategy that will cool themselves in the desert by creating shadow throughout the day cycle. And this is just one of the strategies. So the barrel cactus has many strategies, but this is just focusing in on one strategy. And then the mechanism, one of the mechanisms that they do to do this is the radial ribs. And these outer spines, they create alternating warm and cooler currents inside and outside of the cactus. And then you can go further on to describe that in detail, and you'll see in the smaller drawings exactly how it's doing that. This is just one other example, so you can get into the idea of what the function is. You can find that in the biomimeric taxonomy. The function is regulate temperature. Go into the strategy, how the function is being done, and the mechanism is going even deeper into exactly how that strategy works. What pieces, what parts are in place, how are they organized, how big are they, all kinds of small information that you can add to this to know more about how the strategy works, and that would be the mechanism. So you can see an abstracted design principle that I had done where I say the alternating rib structure create ventilation channels via convection currents and provide shade for temperature regulation. This is also just by taking out the biology to abstract and to simplify the engineering principles to get a closer look at what is happening. I have a couple examples of other organisms that we looked at when we were looking at filtering and at how water flows through systems. And one of the examples we looked at was to look at the Venus flower basket and how the water will flow through using whip-like flagella to manipulate the water flow. So here you can see those three circles again, where you see the whole sponge in the biological strategy diagram, the whole sponge, which going onto the small holes that go through there, where you can see the flagella, and then you zoom in again and exactly how the flagella is working, what shape it has, and there will be a whole description to support this. And that would be the biological strategy. Then you go on to the abstracted design principle and try to take out that biology. Now, how do you do that? Here it's kind of in a schematic way, but for you, we're going to go through this step by step. The second animal that we looked at was the baleen whale and how they filtered the krill out of the water and looking at the mechanism, how that has a hinge, and you're looking here at the different parts of how the hinge opens and closes. The under lip will expand largely, and then the tongue will work as a pressure foot to push the water back out. Now, hopefully, you all have looked at this in much bigger detail. This was just an example that we gave during class. So, before you start, you collect all the information you got in the bio brainstorm. And you have you've already made some drawings of the biological organism itself. You've looked at specific parts of the organism, and then you can organize these from the whole organism and then zooming in, as we did here before, zooming in closer and closer to the mechanism, what's happening. And you'll see on the top an example of a biological strategy diagram that I did for the long-spined sea urchin. And in the bottom, you see the abstracted design principle diagram, where you could see that the radial attachments have something to do with the movement of those spines working independently on the outside of the spiny sea urchin. Also, there's a longer description that goes with these, but this is just to show you how you can visualize your biological strategy diagram and how you can visualize your abstracted design principle diagram. Okay, now it's your turn. First of all, you draw the biological diagram. And as we go on in this lecture, you stop the video and then you continue once you've done the exercise. Step 1 would be to draw the biological diagram and describe the principle of what is happening. Here you can see the diagram of the prairie dog mound, and the biological strategy principle could be prairie dogs build their mounds with entrances at alternating heights, which create suction and ventilation within the burrow via an area of low pressure at the higher opening and high pressure at the lower entrance. This is the Bernoulli's principle. That's happening, and this you'll see this in a lot of other different kinds of science and physics. But this is what is happening. Just by the breeze of the wind, there's a suction created. So what I'd like you to do is stop the video and draw your biological diagram and describe what is happening in the strategy. How is that function of ventilation or cooling, how is that function being done? That will be the strategy. Okay, now you start up the video again, of course, and you see your biological strategy principle and your diagram. So the prairie dogs build their mounds. You've got that already. The next step is to describe the principle, what is happening, and take out the biological terms. So you abstract the biological terms by just leaving out the open ventilation channels at alternating heights create suction and ventilation within the structure where there is an increase of flow and a decrease of pressure between the openings. And as you can see here, we've taken out all the words that are in green that might allude to biological terms. You want to take all the biology out and just leave the principle there. And this is called the abstracted design principle. And the drawing that goes along it will be the diagram, but we'll do that in the next step. So again, you stop the video, write your principle out without biology terms in there, and then start the video again. We'll see you in a bit. The next step is to draw the principle that you have just described. There could be many interpretations, so you just have to try. It's all about repeating, reiterating, iterating, and practice each of these principle diagrams that you draw. And each time you'll see it becomes easier and easier to do, but try to keep it as simple as possible. Remember the monkey cup, the pitcher plant, was very simple drawings and very simple diagrams. So that's what you want to do, keep it as simple as possible. Now you draw the abstracted design principle that you've written here, draw that out and zoom in on certain parts. You can see I zoomed in here to explain what is happening inside a possible rooftop, but it's also could be on the ventilation. If you have the alternating heights and turn that sideways and have different heights in a facade of a building, that could also be possible, both reaching up. So now you draw the diagram. Again, you stop the video, draw your diagram without the biology. So you're drawing your abstracted design principle text and making this visual. Again, once you're done, you start the video back up again. In class, we presented the abstracted design principles to your group, and then you chose one to present to the rest. And this moment, it would be a good time if you have another colleague with you, even if they're from another group, present it to them and see if they understand it. You could even present it to your roommates or to your parents or anybody else, and then you can get some feedback if it's understandable or not. Let them describe your abstracted design principle diagram and see if they know what's going on. And then in class, again, we presented the one chosen abstracted design principle to the rest, and we could all ask questions to those who did it. So be sure to include the following. You include the organism common name, the scientific name, the biological strategy diagram, and the text along with it, which would be more than what is shown here, and the abstracted design principle diagram, and also with more text describing what is happening. And remember, the abstracted design principle would be without the biology. Okay, that would be the next step. And then we go on to looking at some of the nature technology summary cards that I bought from Biomimicry 3.8. And as you can see here, they've got the organism on there. They have the function, change shape or respond to environment, up in orange. You can see the biological diagrams up on the top. And you can see how the abstracted design principle would be down there with the light bulb. So you'll see different things in there. You'll see pictures, you'll see of the organism, the diagrams of the organism, the function, what is nature doing, then the strategy, how the function is being carried out, and then the abstracted design principle underneath. So you see here are three different ways, three things that you can say about it. And remember, there are many, many ways that you could say the abstracted design principle. So there's not necessarily one correct way. It's all about communication between somebody who knows something about the biology of the organism and somebody who wants to design it, for example. Or maybe you're communicating with an engineer, or maybe you're communicating with somebody from the city government who needs to know something about the urban metabolism and the logistics that are going on there. Maybe you've learned something from mycelium. So it's all about looking at the organism and being able to communicate what the organism is doing in design engineering terms. So we'll look at another example. Here, you see the leaf and how the leaf responds to cues, changes shape, and regulates flow. So it's not just one thing that's happening. You can look very close and see when the leaf gathers moisture, it expands, and then an opening comes. So it's using shape-shifting smart materials. They react and respond to the cues and change shape and regulate flow. Another example is the tree frog, which we also looked at in class, how the frog toe pads can stick to the slick surfaces. They can attach temporarily, and they do this by increasing the surface area. And if you look closely at the diagram at the top, you can see the toe pad, zooming in on the toe pad, has all these little sections, and these little sections are even smaller. They have even more little sections, and each of these have these ripples in them that will, if you spread them out, that they increase the surface area. So it's like a huge surface area, and as you know from different organisms that can climb up buildings or walk over water, for example, they have this kind of system. Either they're lighter than what the component underneath them, or they have increased the surface area to a much larger surface area and are able to cling easily to the smooth and wet surfaces. Here you can see the strategy, how they perform the function, and then you can go down to see by the light bulb the abstracted design principle. Well, that will be it for today. If there are any questions, I'll hear about that, and I expect to see your abstracted design principles and diagrams, abstracted design principle diagrams, uploaded onto Blackboard with your nature technology summary, which I can explain in the next video. Okay, see you guys later. Bye-bye.